SITREP World Briefing for August 3, 2026. The Sudanese army carried out a drone strike on a traditional court in North Darfur, Sudan on Sunday, killing 35 people, according to the rights group Emergency Lawyers. The reported target was a court in a village held by the Rapid Support Forces, or RSF, as the army and the RSF fight for territorial control across Darfur and other parts of the country. North Darfur has become one of the most consequential fronts in the war between the Sudanese armed forces and the RSF, because it links western supply routes, displacement corridors, and access to urban centers, including El Fasher, Sudan. A strike on a traditional court is significant because such forums often handle community disputes and customary justice in areas where formal state institutions have collapsed. The reported death toll of 35 adds to a conflict that has repeatedly drawn accusations of indiscriminate attacks, ethnic violence, and assaults on civilian sites by multiple armed actors. Since fighting erupted in 2023, the army under Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and the RSF led by Mohammed Hamdan Daglo have split Sudan into rival zones of control, and Darfur has remained especially vulnerable because communities there already carried the legacy of earlier wars, mass displacement, and weak state protection. The United States and Israel moved to pause further strikes on Iran after weeks of violence, with President Donald Trump saying the halt would hold if an agreement to end the conflict could be reached. Trump also said new talks with Tehran could begin on Monday, signaling that Washington was again trying to shift from military pressure to diplomacy. Tehran quickly challenged the U.S. account. Iran's foreign ministry said no negotiations were taking place with Washington, directly contradicting Trump's suggestion that talks were imminent. The pause matters because the current war began on February 28th, when the U.S. and Israel launched strikes against Iran, and later diplomacy produced only temporary lulls before violence resumed. Israel wants to prevent Iran from regaining military room to maneuver. The Trump administration wants a deal that can stop further attacks, and Iran is signaling that it will not publicly validate negotiations on Washington's timetable. A Ukrainian drone strike hit a Wildberries warehouse in Russia's Vladimir region, causing a fire at one of the online retailer's facilities, according to the company. The attack formed part of a broader wave of cross-border strikes as Ukraine and Russia continued long-range attacks against each other, extending the war beyond frontline positions and into logistics, commercial infrastructure, and population centers inside Russia. The warehouse fire in Vladimir region east of Moscow illustrates how Ukrainian drone operations are reaching deeper into Russia's interior and disrupting supply chains as well as military planning. Wildberries is a major commercial platform in Russia, so a strike on one of its warehouses carries economic as well as symbolic weight, showing that civilian-adjacent infrastructure tied to distribution networks is increasingly exposed to the conflict. The attack came amid an exchange in which at least 14 people were reported killed overall, including 9 in Russia and 5 in Ukraine, as both sides intensified aerial strikes. Cuba's state-run electricity system suffered another nationwide collapse late on Sunday, after the state grid operator reported that the island's power network had failed and plunged the country into darkness. The new outage hit a country that has already endured a series of total grid collapses, highlighting the fragility of Cuba's aging energy infrastructure and the difficulty authorities face in restoring stable generation and transmission across a nationwide system that serves more than 11 million people. The blackout disrupted daily life across Cuba, where repeated power cuts have strained transport, communications, food storage, and hospital operations. Each major outage also affects basic household services because water supplies weaken when pumps lose electricity, and fans and refrigeration stop working in the Caribbean heat. The latest failure is politically sensitive for President Miguel Diaz-Canel's government because electricity shortages have become one of the clearest symbols of the island's broader economic crisis, which officials have linked in part to fuel shortages, obsolete generating plants, and the continuing pressure of the U.S. embargo. Greek firefighters, pilots, and civil protection officials battled a fast-moving wildfire west of Athens, as strong winds pushed flames deeper, into the Athens region and forced wider evacuations on August 3rd. Emergency crews used helicopters and ground teams to try to slow the fire's advance, while residents in communities near the capital were ordered out as conditions worsened. The blaze came after a destructive week of wildfires across Greece, giving the latest fire national significance because it threatened populated areas near the country's political and economic center. The emergency response was further complicated when two firefighting helicopters collided in mid-air while operating over the fire zone west of Athens. Greece's fire service said each aircraft had a two-person crew, and search and rescue operations were launched after the crash. The area west of Athens is strategically important because fires there can move quickly between forested land, industrial zones, and settlements, creating pressure on officials to protect both lives and infrastructure at the edge of the capital. With winds still driving the blaze and crews stretched by a week of fires across the country, the government faced renewed scrutiny over preparedness, response speed, and the safety of the aerial firefighting effort. French authorities said the Gironde megafire near Bordeaux had been contained, marking an important step in one of the country's most serious wildfire emergencies of the summer. Nearly 3,000 firefighters remained deployed in Gironde, southwestern France, because parts of the blaze were still burning, and officials wanted to prevent flare-ups. The fire's scale made it a national test for France's civil security system, especially in a region of pine forests and dry vegetation where wind and heat can rapidly turn contained hotspots into renewed fronts. Most of the roughly 200,000 people who had been told to evacuate were allowed to return home, and thousands of residents and tourists prepared to go back to affected areas in southwestern France. Authorities kept emergency personnel in place as a precaution, while heat alerts and storm warnings remained in force elsewhere in the country. For France, the Gironde fire near Bordeaux has carried significance because the department is both a major population area and a gateway to the Atlantic Southwest, with transport links, tourism, and forestry all vulnerable to prolonged burning. Keeping thousands of firefighters on the ground after containment reflected lessons from recent European fire seasons, in which extreme heat and dry conditions have repeatedly allowed embers to reignite. The current improvement in Gironde offered relief for returning families and local officials. Sources and the full written briefing are available at sitrepbrief.com.